This program is brought to you in part by the Eugenie and Joseph Jones Family Foundation, a local foundation proud to support education, the arts, and culture in the greater New Orleans area.
Hello, I'm Marcia Cavanaugh. Thanks so much for joining us. Well, our format is a little different tonight. We have our usual major stories to discuss, including Tulane's involvement with the redevelopment of Charity Hospital and a federal judge intensifying the probe of the archdioceses' legal problems, plus changes in the state Supreme Court. We are also taking an extended look at the career of the Times-Picayune New Orleans Advocate's managing editor of investigations, who is moving on to another market, but who leaves a legacy of stories that were part of his beat. Joining us are Errol, Laborde, producer of Informed Sources, Stephanie Riegel, staff writer of the Times-Picayune, the New Orleans Advocate, and heading to the Boston Globe, investigative reporter Gordon Russell. All righty, Steph, we're going to go on over to you first because another turn, another twist in the Archdiocese bankruptcy saga. An outside expert has been brought in.
Right. The judge in the case last week, after a hearing, she said, guys, I want to bring in an independent expert. Tell me why I shouldn't. Earlier this week, we had that hearing. Several of the different factions said why they didn't think she should, but she went ahead and did it anyway. She appointed a New York-based turnaround expert, which is the kind of person whose firm you would call in, say, like when your company was in trouble. I'm not saying that he couldn't weigh in on litigation, but they're typically brought in to help restructure companies or make really complex deals happen. She has asked him to advise her on several sort of key controversial issues that are before her right now on the docket that she has to settle. Among them is the high cost of this case, which now tops $40 million, and the appointment of M3 Partners in New York is going to add $350,000 more to that bill. She's also looking at like whether she's gotten good value for it, because 4 years and 4 months into this, there's still no settlement. Now, another thing she's going to ask him to look at is whether the plans that we are expecting to now be introduced next month by September 16th, whether they're viable and whether the church will be able to afford to fund one of them, or and remain a going concern, to continue out its mission and its charitable services and keep its parishes open. There are also some other issues. There's a very controversial motion on the table that one of some of the survivors' attorneys have asked her to look at removing Archbishop Amond from his oversight role in the Archdiocese of New Orleans and appoint an outside trustee to basically run the case from the perspective of the debtor, which as a practical matter, it's hard to even wrap your head around how that would happen, right? And from the perspective of like canon law and the authority that he has from the Vatican to run the Archdiocese, it's hard to figure out how that would happen, but in a very scathing court filing earlier this month, basically, they pointed to mismanagement and allegations that one of his key advisors on the case, an unpaid volunteer, a longtime, friend and church, a volunteer, was not qualified to advise, to the extent that he has. And so for all those reasons, she's asked Mo Medji is his name, M3 Partners, to come in and prepare a report within 60 days on whether this thing can go forward, because the implication was, if not, let's dismiss it now. Now, I don't think she will. I also think that what she's really trying to do is maybe give herself some cover, because there are some different factions and even a schism really between different groups of attorneys representing the survivors as a whole, all 500 claimants in this case, versus several dozen of the claimants that had filed lawsuits in state court and had really, really strong cases against the church several years ago, and those cases were frozen when the Archdiocese filed for bankruptcy. And those two sets of attorneys have different interests, and I think they have the potential to maybe blow up a settlement if they don't come together, because, and I know I'm really deep in the weeds here, but stick with me, you need to have like a super majority of all of the claimants that vote on a settlement plan to get a bankruptcy out in this case. So that means a lot of these 500 claimants are going to have to approve a plan. And if you've got a group that thinks that they can go to state court and sue the church and maybe win a large settlement, then they might not have as much incentive to want to vote for a plan if they don't feel like they're getting enough compensation.
So this bankruptcy has been going on now for what, almost
What did I say, 4 years and 4 months?
4 years, and meanwhile the survivors are awaiting, their settlement or whatever it is going to be, a resolution in some time.
That's
of
right.
some type.
And some of them have died. So it's very frustrating for them. And as I mentioned, one of the issues before Grable is whether $40 million has really been well spent. Have they gotten value for it?
Hasn't there also been a motion to hold back payment for lawyers?
Right. That's in connection with that. One of the motions on the table is a fee holdback. It would hold back 20% of the attorney compensation until the end of the case. And there was also a motion to appoint a fee examiner to go back and look at all the legal bills. Grable said, I know what the intent of these motions is, trying to rein in the costs, but she said, I don't think either of those motions would really achieve what we're trying to do, which is to work towards a settlement. She said this will just add more expense to the case and potentially drag things out longer.
Isn't the Archbishop facing mandatory retirement next year?
The Vatican, well, or sooner, right? At age 75, which in his case is November, the Vatican requires archbishops to submit their resignation. But he can ask them not to accept it. He can ask them to defer it. And he has suggested that he doesn't want to step down until he can finish this case.
So, yes, you were in the weeds. It keeps your head spinning. And how can anybody keep up with this? So essentially now, this outside firm has 60 days to go before this bankruptcy judge and say, basically what? To find out whether this bankruptcy proceeding is possible to continue?
Basically, in simplest terms, that's what she has asked them to do. Whether they can really do that in 60 days is a tall order. They have 45 days to do all of their fact-finding. But they're going to weigh in, for instance, on whether the fee motions are a good idea or not. They're going to weigh in on whether it really whether it's even possible to remove Amen. And based on conversations that they're going to have with the mediator and with all the different parties in the case, whether they think the parties can come together and vote on one of these settlement plans that will be proposed, we heard in court earlier this week, by this time next month, if not before.
All right. Well, we'll see where it goes. Thank you for keeping us informed about all of this. It's a difficult job for you as a reporter, too, I know, to keep track of all this. Yeah. All right. Thanks a lot, Steph. E, over to you. What's going on with our state Supreme Court?
You don't hear much about the state Supreme Court, certainly not as much as the national Supreme Court. There were a couple of stories over the last couple of weeks. First of all, the state Supreme Court has 7 members. Of the 7 right now, and race is a factor in talking about this. There are currently 6 who are white and 1 who is black. The lone black is from the New Orleans area, and that's Piper Griffin, who's also the lone Democrat on the thing, okay? One of the whites is an independent, the rest are Republicans. Anyway, a couple of things have happened is that there were challenges as elections came up to refigure one of the districts so that there'd be another black majority district. That was accomplished. A district that's kind of like the Baton Rouge area was made into a black majority district. 3 candidates qualified. All 3 were black. But there were challenges by one of the black opponents about the other 2 all over income tax matters, that there's rules about when you filed your income tax and the claim was made for various reasons. The other 2 didn't. That was the decision that had to be made by the state Supreme Court. And they ruled over the last couple of weeks in the fact that the other 2 were not qualified to run. So one candidate, a guy named John Michael Guidry, who was in the appeals court, all of a sudden he wins, all right? That's the way you want to do it in politics, to win without opposition. And so he comes into office, and so he'll be the second black on the court coming in soon. The other thing that's happened is that there's a vacancy, a guy named James Genovese, who represents sort of like if you go into the Cajun country and then up into central Louisiana, he accepted the job at the presidency of Northwest University. Now, he went to Northwest as a student. He went to law school at Loyola. The governor, Landry, was very much behind his getting the job. And they are kind of personal friends, but he wasn't behind him because he thought he'd make a great president, even though he might. He wasn't behind him because he thought he was too liberal for the court. And Landry wants to get his hands on getting another judge on there who's not quite as liberal. And so Genovese got the job, and so he's resigning. So it's going to be an election in spring to elect a new judge. And Landry's already said, we want somebody that's more conservative. So has the Attorney General, Liz Muriel. So there might be a little ideological shift at that point. So those are two important things that have happened. The responsibilities of the court are like all Supreme Courts. They oversee appeals. They act as the disciplinarian for the judicial system. That's why they were able to remove these two people. In Louisiana, by law, they automatically take appeals for all capital punishment cases. So it goes on.
So this new justice has been sworn in? Has he been sworn in yet?
No.
Not yet.
No, there's going to be an election to fill Genovese's seat. And
No, I'm talking about
in spring of 25. No, I don't think so. No.
Okay, all right, thanks.
But there's a guy named, I think they already know who's going to win Genovese's seat. Okay, a guy named Cade, who's from the Lake Charles area.
Okay.
Who Landry's is all behind. Everybody else is behind too.
All right, well, we'll be looking for that one.
And it's more
Meanwhile,
conservative.
Justice Guidry is the latest justice on the
Right.
state Supreme Court. All right, thanks a lot. Gordon, over to you. You're leaving us.
Yeah.
We're all absolutely thrilled for you because he's going over to the Boston Globe. If anybody saw the movie Spotlight, which was an Academy Award winner, it was about the investigations division at the Boston Globe, which they call Spotlight, and he's going to be now the deputy editor of it, right?
That's right, and it's a homecoming in a way for me. I was born in Massachusetts, although I've lived away from Massachusetts most of my life. But I've got both my parents grew up there, my grandparents. I still have aunts and uncles in the area. My daughter recently graduated college and relocated to Boston, and so I've always been a loyal Globe reader and an admirer of the work they do. And an old friend who folks may remember from New Orleans named Brendan McCarthy is actually the editor of the Spotlight team, so I'll be working with him. It just seemed like a great.
He used to be on the show.
Yeah, and he was a newspaper guy, and then he went into TV. So
And you used to be his boss, now he's going to be your boss.
Yeah,
There you go.
it's going to be great.
How long have you been here in New Orleans?
I've been here 25 years now, so this is home to me. Feels more like home than any place I've ever lived. It's the longest I've ever lived anywhere by far. And my wife and I met in New York. We both worked in restaurants at the time, and eventually made our way down here. With stops in West Virginia and Florida, actually. But we've been here a long time, and it's been a great run. And I've loved every minute of it, and I'm really sorry to leave. I'm excited about the new adventure, but I hate leaving this place because it's been so great to me, and it's full of such great stories. And the people, that's what I'm going to miss, the people. I won't miss August, but I'll miss the people.
But the sort of thing that Stephanie was just talking about the archdiocese was the door that Spotlight opened.
Yes.
That unit opened many years ago.
That's right. That's what the film was about. Yeah. And of course, our local Jason Berry was a crucial person in kind of shining the original light on the Catholic Church abuse scandal, but then it was the Spotlight team at the Boston Globe that really blew it up into a worldwide story.
Is there any more to that up there, or are they done with that whole storyline?
Well,
you won't have to do it.
I don't think they have what we have going on right
Right.
now. I think they've already been through all that.
Sure.
I'm hoping.
But we'll be finding out what's going on there and seeing Gordon dig it up, because you've done such amazing work here with the Times-Picayune. So we wanted to take a look at some of the major stories that you've covered in your tenure here. So I'll let you go on with your list.
Okay. Well, first on the list had to be, and it's kind of silly in a way to make it a story, but Hurricane Katrina was, of course, the event that shaped this city forever and shaped all of us probably, and everybody who lives in this place, and a lot of people who don't live here anymore, and of course people who died. So that was in 2005, and that changed everything, and we're still feeling the after effects from it now in many ways. I think the things that stand out for me in terms of that as a story at the time, there was obviously the immediate story of rescues and bravery and tragedy and people drowning in their homes and things like that, and questions about were we ready for the evacuation? I mean, in some ways, the evacuation was a success because most people got out, but of course, thousands and thousands of people didn't, and we didn't have a very good plan to get them out, and a lot of people without access to transportation. And then, over time, we started doing more stories, accountability stories. So there were a lot of stories about how should we rebuild the city? Is there a way to do it that's equitable, that makes things safer and makes, ensures that something like this won't happen again?
And then Danziger Bridge also.
Another group of stories that was very important, I thought, was the conduct of the police in particular after the storm. And that took a long time to unfold, but that was, through the work of journalists largely, as well as prosecutors and grand juries and the FBI. But the Danziger Bridge was the headline, but there were also a number of other incidents that were pretty troubling that police had kind of covered up.
And so you guys were on the ground here. I mean, during Katrina and the immediate aftermath of Katrina, when everything was still flooded, you were here.
Yes, there was we were all, the entire newspaper was here, and then at some point, most of the people evacuated to sort of set up shop, and first in Houma and then Baton Rouge. And I was with a small group of people that stayed here, and actually in my house and Stephanie Grace's house. She's a neighbor of mine, and our neighborhood wasn't flooded, and so that became kind of our base camp for the newspaper. And actually, interestingly, a little side story, a lot of national and international photographers stayed at my house, and a lot of the pictures that made it into newspapers around the world and whatnot were sent from a little landline in my house that for some miraculously worked throughout the storm.
What an experience for you. What an experience. Okay, let's move on to another story. That was a really important story.
Okay, well, so I was going to mention the so-called Jim Crow juries are Louisiana's law that allowed for non-unanimous jury verdicts, which, I'm very proud that we won a Pulitzer Prize for, but really the big impact was that we changed the law. Not we, the newspaper, but our reporting, I think, helped to kick off a public campaign of awareness, which led to voters in Louisiana changing the law, which to me was really powerful because a lot of times we write things and we are able to show the injustice of something, and then it feels like it lands with a thud. And this was something that people seem to get. And the gist of the story was, you only had to have 10 out of 12 jurors vote to convict someone. And this law had racist origins, and it had racist continuing impacts, and black defendants were much more likely to be convicted by non-unanimous juries, and black jurors were much more likely to vote against conviction but be overruled in these. So that was a key finding that I think helped voters decide we should get in line with the rest of the country.
And so we actually made that change.
Yes.
Because you informed the public.
Yeah, I think we played a big role in it. Yeah.
You absolutely did. All right, another story, a lot of political corruption that you guys covered.
Yeah, I mean, corruption has kind of been a big theme in my career, I guess, here. And that, when I got here, there was a big City Hall corruption probe involving the Morial administration. That was kind of my first taste of all this. And that was, very interesting to me. And it was like unlike anything I'd seen elsewhere, just the kind of brazenness, the way that political cronies got contracts and traded favors and that sort of thing. And then after Katrina, we started investigating Ray Nagin, who was the mayor that followed Mark Morial. And of course, he ended up going to prison, being convicted and going to prison after he left office based on some of the things he did in office. And during that whole time, we were investigating also the Congressman Bill Jefferson and some members of his family. That was his kind of whole political organization was collapsed because of these federal investigations, some of them spurred by journalism. And then another one I'd mention is the prison system, which we wrote a lot about in the last decade, the sort of cronyism in the prison system, and the famous Angola warden Burl Cain had to resign over some of our reporting in that, and his son actually went to prison for some for sort of cronyism as well.
Seems like never a shortage of really big stories.
Yeah.
You've been kept busy in your tenure with the Times-Picayune. Okay, property taxes. You wanted to take a look at that one too?
Yeah, so this one was one I was really proud of, and I think it actually did change some things here, which is when I got here, I started looking into the property tax system, and I thought it was crazy that there were 7 property assessors in New Orleans. It was the only place I'd ever heard of that had more than one. Why would you have different assessors for different neighborhoods? And it was kind of something people were just used to here, and it dated to the old time when New Orleans was 3 cities and the ward system, and it was crazy. So, and their political imperative, each assessor just wanted to keep assessments as low as possible to get reelected. And so what you had was people basically weren't paying any taxes, except if you bought a house in the city. if you were a new person, then you might pay significant taxes because the tax rate was quite high. So this was a crazy system, and it was a disincentive, frankly, for people to move here, among many other things. And so I think our stories showing how inequitable this system was helped lead to this change where we now have one assessor, like most places do.
For Orleans Parish, right?
Yeah, and I think the assessments, they're never going to be perfect, but they're much more accurate than they used to be.
There's always room for argument with assessment,
Yeah.
it would seem, wherever you
Yeah.
are. All right, then also the exemptions of the statewide level.
Yeah, so a story we did during the sort of end of the Bobby Jindal administration was about these tax giveaways. And there was one of the things that was really creating these giant holes in Louisiana's state budget, and it was partly a function of, Bobby Jindal was running for president, and he wanted to be able to say that he had never supported a tax increase, and you could say that taking away a tax break was not a tax increase. He was afraid that he was going to be attacked for increasing taxes if he did that. So you had all these tax breaks that had no ceiling on them, and they were just running away. There was the film program, there's this industrial tax exemption program, and there was no effort to assess whether any of these things were doing any good or not. It was just like companies could come in and grab as much free money as they wanted to. So we did a big series on that called Giving Away Louisiana that I think really helped people understand this system, and it led to some reforms, particularly of the industrial tax exemption program.
And so, I mean, what you've just listed there, it just really points out, it spotlights the importance of local journalism. Definitely does. And you've been so right there in the middle of it.
Yeah, well, it's been a pleasure, and this is a great. There's a lot to write about in this community. There's a lot of problems here, but it's a wonderful place, and I think sometimes when people are shown kind of what the problem is, they react, and that's been very gratifying.
You're informing the people, eh?
It also shows how important a daily newspaper is to a community.
Right.
Because the daily newspaper has the staff, it has the resources, it has the capability. No other medium can compete with that. I mean, they can learn from the daily newspaper. Without a daily newspaper, community is in real trouble, and you've all done a good job.
Thank you.
Through some rough times. Through some.
Yeah.
Right, but that once again, the importance of local journalism to let our local populace know what's going on and make informed decisions regarding policymakers, et cetera. So congratulations to you. One question though, your wife is a Louisiana girl. How is she feeling about moving up to Massachusetts?
She has mixed feelings like I do. I mean, she loves Massachusetts, but it's tough to leave, and we've been here 25 years, and it's bittersweet.
Well, safe travels on your way up there. We'll miss you, but we'll be looking for you for what you're doing. And the Times-Picayune is who's going to fill your place?
The job is posted right now, and if you know anyone who's a good candidate, please get them in touch with the editor.
Big shoes to fill. Thanks a lot, Gordon. Okay, we're going to wrap up with you, Steph, because there's Charity Hospital, and it's still there empty.
It's still there empty, like the archdiocese in bankruptcy. It's another big thing hanging out there. We visited with President Mike Fitz of Tulane a couple of weeks ago, and he talked about the role that they are hoping to play. We reported on this. Tulane has always agreed to be the anchor tenant in this redevelopment of the building that has been imagined now and in the works for several years. But the team that was awarded the contract to get it done blew through $70 million and essentially has nothing to show for it. So Tulane, which was going to take 40% of the building or something, has been negotiating with them behind the scenes for several months. And they have reached sort of a tentative deal under which Tulane would agree to be basically take like an ownership role of the building and be completely in charge of seeing this development through. We want to turn this 1 million square foot building into sort of a mixed use centerpiece of a medical district. It would have medical offices and lab space and some ground floor retail. Basically is the plan.
The cost is what?
But the cost is at least $600 million, which probably means $750, $800 million.
Because it started out at $200 million, right?
Well, 300, something like that. And so the devil is in the details, and they have not worked out those details yet. We don't know, what the ask is going to be, but President Fitz did indicate that they will be looking for public money to make this happen. Which was the reason that LSU, which owns the building technically, selected the development team that it did in the first place, because they said they could do it without public investment. And LSU was like, oh, that makes it such a better deal. Of course, it also made it pie in the sky and impossible, and it didn't happen, and there are investors that are out $70 million. So LSU should have terrible egg on its face as a result of
Because
this.
they actually own the building. They selected, as you said, the first development group, but then a second one was brought in, right?
A second one, the Domain Companies, which has a very impressive track record in New York and also did the South Market District here, they were brought in last year to be the developers. Technically, they're the developer of record. They're basically hired by the investors that are still, have some skin in this to try to make it happen. But they're not the developers in terms of like putting up all the money. They're more like a facilitator developer. They're a developer of record, they're called. So
what's the hopeful timeline for work to even begin? Is there even one? We just don't know.
There's not. I mean, best case, if they finalized everything tomorrow, which they're not, they might be able to get work again going in 2020, end of 2025, 2026.
Wow.
Late last year, Tulane was still saying they hoped to be in by 2027. So I think now you're looking at least 2028, if ever.
So 20 years that building has just stood there. Okay, Steph. All righty, E, we're going around the table, and you first.
Well, we've been hearing a lot this week about Ed Daniels, the sportscaster and sports director for Channel 26, who died last week. Yesterday there was a tribute to him for his family, but especially touching was something that happened last night. There's Ed right there. But if you're along Poydras Street, the Superdome had special lighting just for him, and we'll see something that they did. Isn't that beautiful? That's a tribute to Ed Daniels. And this happens. One of his big things was Friday Night Football. He pioneered TV broadcasting. We're at the beginning of Friday Night Football, and of course the Saints return to New Orleans this weekend too.
Our sincere condolences to his family.
I thought that Superdome tribute was good. And by the way, they also tried the lights on the Mississippi River Bridge last night. It had nothing to do with that, but you had two places that were illuminated in the sky last night.
All righty. And once again, condolences to Ed's family. Really, really great guy, sweet guy, and a lot of outpouring from the community regarding his loss. Okay, Steph, over to you.
NASA's Inspector General issued a report a few weeks back just kind of blasting the workforce at Michoud and blaming them for some of the problems with the Artemis rocket program. And so we're taking a look this weekend at some of the reaction to that from economic development folks and the folks that are doing the training of the workers that are on the job there.
All right. Gordon?
I guess I just wanted to thank everybody watching and everybody in this city and region for allowing me to cover this place and calling me with tips and being so welcoming. And it's just been the honor and privilege of my life to do this. And I'm going to miss this place a lot, but I'll be back for lots of holidays and whatnot.
We're going to miss you, and we thank you for joining us as much as you did to keep everybody informed. Thanks, everybody, for watching, and we'll see you again next week for Informed Sources. Have a good evening.
This program is brought to you in part by the Eugenie and Joseph Jones Family Foundation, a local foundation proud to support education, the arts, and culture in the greater New Orleans area.